Our facility is only one of 4 in the United States. There's one in Florida, there's 2 in Texas, there's an outdoor facility in Louisiana, and our facility is the only one that is a fully recirculating system. And to put this on layman's term, it's very similar to a swimming pool. And I'll go through the system here pretty quick. So my next objective is, where am I going to put this facility? And I looked at all our warm water hatcheries across the state. I was looking at the water quality, looking at manpower, and Humboldt Hatchery was the best place to put this, mainly because of the expansion we have done there. This is the old part of the hatchery. It's built in 1957. This is Annex 1. This has got 18 new ponds on it. This was finished in, I think, 2008. And then in 2013, Annex 2 was completed, and that's 11 ponds. And Google hadn't caught up because they've renamed Humboldt Lake Davy Crockett. So, hard to see, but this is our home for the bass facility. We actually got the lake if we need water, but we made some changes in midstream. We had one of our engineering operators to build us this 3/4 acre pond. Down in the left corner of that pond, there's some pumps, so we can actually fill our raceways with those pumps. And also, I always want to try to make our facilities multi-purpose, and we can do that with the pumps there. We've got a 300 gallon per minute pump, and we can actually put 100 gallons per minute through the raceways, or we can put 25 or 30 through the system. So when we get through with largemouth, we can come in with catfish and spawn catfish a month earlier, and we can use this building not as a recirculating system, but as a flow-through. So thinking down the road of other possibilities of this facility. Footprint, this is a 50 by 100. This picture does not give it justice. I was on top of a dozer trying to get a good picture of it. The raceways are 70 feet long, 8 feet wide, and about 3.5 feet tall. We're not concerned about the height. We usually keep about 2 feet of water in the raceways. I went with the tubular type building structure. TVA uses these extensively, and I've got several buildings that we've used that for. Cuts the cost way down. We can actually get a 50-foot span with this tubular design. We didn't want any center posts because we'd be running into them, or they'd fall right into in the middle of a raceway, and we didn't want that. Outside of the building, you see there's no windows. That helped cut cost, and also this is climate controlled. We've got one personnel door in the front and on the rear, and we've got 2 garage doors. The staff was just phenomenal, very dedicated. They put in all the water drains, the airline piping, and the water inlet structures. I think they're all certified plumbers now. But they did all the heavy lifting. We contracted out the concrete, the building, and the electrical work. And we found out that you shouldn't hire an electrician at the duck hunter because he disappeared for about 3 months and delayed the project. We also had some other delays with weather. And here's a couple of technicians. They literally jump in with both feet. I think Jacob there on the right, they had to pull him out with the backhoe. But this passion and dedication of the staff starts at the top, and I want to recognize the 2 hatchery Humboldt managers. Hunter, if you raise your hand. Hunter was a hatchery manager when we started this project. He's been promoted to the management part of the agency lakes in Region 1, and also he's the manager supervisor over the hatchery. And then Tom next to him, thank you. He was the assistant manager, and now he's the hatchery manager. And Tom is probably one of our best intensive culturists in the hatchery system. But very dedicated. Chief Wilson would, when he was chief of fisheries, he'd walk by and go, what do you got Hunter doing? What bridge do you have him jumping off now? Literally, that's a dedication we've got of our hatchery staff. So inside the building, we've got this new insulated technology. This is a bubble wrap that's wrapped in aluminum. When you walk into this building, when it's operational, it's like a sauna. It's probably near 80–90% humidity. So we were concerned about using standard insulation because it would eventually accumulate the moisture, and then we'd have insulation falling from the ceilings. So this cuts down on some of that moisture. Also, one of the new technologies, I guess, is the lighting. This is LED lighting. It was important to go to LED lighting because we've got a row in there that's dimmable. And in this spawning situation, we want to control the photo period. So when the staff leaves in the afternoon and evening, they dim this facility to mimic dusk and dawn. So when they leave, they dim them. We have this on a timer, and when we bring the bass brood in, we set it on 12-hour timer, and we know that we can drop our mats in and increase the photo period by 2 hours, and the bass will spawn. So when the lights go off at night, it's kind of a subdued darkness. And I can tell you, walking in here at 12 o'clock during the day, you can't see. So we didn't want the lights coming on at full force because the bass would jump out of the raceway. And they'll run into the concrete raceway, and we didn't want that. So the lighting is very key in our production of spawning of these bass. The blue tanks to the right are our fry hatching troughs, and you can see some of the piping going into the raceway. These are on the recirculating system as well. This upside down T structure is actually the intake in the lower part of the raceway going to the filtration skid. And that consists of the new technology bead filters. This is a waste removal from the raceway. It's more efficient than the sand filters that you have in a swimming pool. We also have UV filtration. So in 180 passes of the raceway, all the pathogens are killed. So over time, we have no fungus, we have no ick, we have no parasites due to the UV filtration. The new technology continues with these multi-stage pumps. We can actually dial in gallon per minute. We run 50 gallons per minute in the raceways. The water leaves that filtration skid, goes underground, comes up through the water heaters. These are 12,000 watt water heaters, and we have one for each raceway. And when we fired up this system, we didn't trip a breaker. We didn't trip the service panel like you got in your home. We blew a transformer. So we had a few more delays and less sleep for Hunter and I. Gibson County actually came out and go, "What are y'all doing?" And actually had to put another meter base in. So there was some surprises during construction. We've got this is probably the most important part of the filtration system. This is a biofilter. It's probably got 500 million of these little plastic bio material. You can see how it's kind of misshapen. It's got a bunch of prongs on it. This is where bacteria grow, and it's very important in the system that we control ammonia. The Florida bass do not like ammonia. So this system is probably the most important. We've got a blower that puts air in the raceways and also drives the bio filter. And we got a little video, maybe a little bit of delay. I had added some media there on the left. Come on. All right. The white media is new. The colored media has got bacteria on it. And over time, that media will sink. And we've got 8 air stones in there driving this biofilter. And also, this also strips CO2 from the system, which can be hazardous. New technology, the price is coming down. This is a constant monitoring dissolved oxygen in the raceway. Staff just walks by and makes sure that this is correct. This is perfect for a raceway. Our brood sources, we've got 2-year-old brood. These are actually fry grow out from the 2015 year class. Some of the hatcheries had some extra left over from production and threw them in the reservoirs. I'm not sure why they did that. This was a surprise, unless they just wanted to catch them as they got bigger. But it was good that they did that, because this was the start of our brood. And we've got good genetic makeup because they came from 3 different states, so Florida, Louisiana, and Texas. So our bass brood is top-notch in the Florida gene genetic. I was a little bit scared about our 2-year-old bass. We didn't know if they were going to spawn. It takes them a while to acclimate to the raceway, as you would imagine. So Louisiana said they were getting rid of some of their older brood of 2009 year class, so those were 8 years old. So we went in and got 20 pair just to make sure we knew what we were doing and our system would actually work. The funny thing is, our brood outdid the Louisiana brood. All our in-house brood were pit tagged. It's very similar to what you pit tag a cat and a dog, and I even tested it on my daughter's cat, and it works. We scanned each bass, and it went into a database that I used later. We fin clipped all our broods, sent them to Auburn, where we have a contract that does our Florida bass genetics. Dr. Peatman that we work with said that our brood needed to be contain Florida alleles of 97% or higher. And you can see on this one sheet, there was multiple sheets. We've got a high percentage of 100% Floridas. That one I highlighted is an outlier of 90%. So with the pit tagging, I was able to go back and find that fish. I also got the 96.05. I was actually able to find those 2 fish and discard them from our brood. Our brood housing, we've got approximately 300 at Humboldt and 150 at Eagle Bend. The old saying, I didn't want to have all my eggs in one basket in case there was a catastrophic event at one of those hatcheries that wouldn't hinder our spawning process. So I've got them split up. We have river otter problems at most of our hatcheries, even our trout hatcheries, and they've even trapped some in Irwin, in the middle of the city in Irwin, at our trout hatchery. Eagle Bend is plagued by the river otter. So we did some research, and with the help of the Wildlife Division, they paid half of this chain link fence. This is 4-foot high fence. We've got welded wire on the ground. They're notorious for digging under the fences. And if the welded wire wasn't good enough, we put chunk rock on it. I was concerned about them climbing the fence since it was only 4 feet high. So I put up trail cameras, and we've got a good row of seagulls, and then this guy didn't know what to do. He's not a problem if we didn't have the fence, because he would be underwater if he was in the pond bottom, and he can't stand on this pond liner side anyway. But one good thing was it did snow there at Eagle Bend. The hatchery manager saw the tracks up to the fence, but didn't see tracks on the inside. So I'm pretty confident this is a good predator control. Getting into spawning and rearing, this is the fun stuff for the staff. All that hard work gets paid off. They first pull the brood out of the holding ponds. We sort based on sex. We did 20 pair per raceway. We're going to make some altercations on that next spring. Inside the raceway, it may take a second to work. We put these spawn tech mats every 6 foot. We alternate them in the raceway. The mats are up against the wall. That way the male only has to protect out in front of the mat. And they're very territorial. They're not as bad as smallmouth. He was just checking out the camera. The females will run up and down the raceway, and the male goes out and tries to entice the female. I believe this male spawned the next morning. And we see that most of the spawning is done at dusk when they turn those lights down in the evening, they usually spawn at dusk. And we see those out in the pond production as well. It's very important on our lighting control. It's a typical, this is Hunter and Tom checking out a nest. I can tell you there's eggs there because that bass didn't swim off. If their eggs weren't there, he'd swim off. He would come back. But they just use a light to make sure there's eggs there. If there are, they'll pull that mat out. This is an egg mass, probably about 4,000, 5,000 eggs. And it goes into our hatching trough. They're vertically mounted. That way when they hatch, the eggs fall off and go to the bottom. And you may be curious, on the back side, that's a weight there to keep the mat down on the bottom. We also have window screen around there because there's a few seconds that the egg is not adhesive, and they will go through there. So we put the window screen on the back of the SpawnTech spawning mat, so we didn't have fry going in the raceways. So, and we also treat these with the water temp at 71, 72. They hatch in 2 days. We also treat with a high concentration of hydrogen peroxide to take care of egg fungus. Our staff at all the hatcheries are very good fabricators. This is a Crowder screen that they had to build in those 12-foot troughs. You're probably curious about the rope. The rope is pulled along as the Crowder screen is moved. If you didn't have that rope there, it'd want to pull up. So we want to crowd all those fry into a corner, and then they're dipped out. And here's Tom. He's getting every drip of water off of that net because we numerate by weight. We know that these Florida bass fry at 6 days old numerate to 295 per gram. It's interesting with these bass, as they get bigger, the egg diameter gets bigger and the fry gets bigger. So we'll probably be dropping that number down to about 275, but they do subsamples. So we enumerate these fry. We stock about 75,000 to 100,000 in our production ponds, depending on what hatchery they're going to. And this is the end results. We shoot for around 700 to 800 fingerlings per pound, which equates to about 1 3/4 to 2 inches. It's important that we get these bass out as soon as possible because we want to stock them before our native bass have spawned, and also hopefully to hit the shad spawn process. So we keep them in our ponds for no more than 40 days. And this is our results from 17. I would have been tickled to death if we had one of them spawn, but we actually had 80 mat spawns. We went longer. I'm hoping that we can spawn these bass in 2 weeks and be done, but with this fry picking up from other states, we had more time to experiment and try different things within the facility. Like I said earlier, we put 20 pair in there and we got 80 mat spawns. And if you're following at home, how did we get 80 mats from 20 females or 60 females? Well, they are multiple spawners, and we witnessed that in here. So from the egg count there, the females were averaging about 6,000 eggs, which is about right for the poundage. So they will spawn every day or spawn every other day. So we're going to change our female count. We can increase our females to 30 and 20 males, and we actually should get more spawns because the males just they'll spawn like crazy, and by taking the mat out, they're ready to spawn again. And the total number we produce is 517,000. We're going to have to double that for our stocking program. And finally, the Florida Bass Brood program is a 365-day event. We've got staff monitoring the ponds, and we have to keep these things fed. And this is a standard of 10 pounds of forage per pound of body weight. You can see the math there. Just at Humboldt, we're going to need 6,000 pounds of forage, and we can purchase it at $4 a pound. So we're looking just at Humboldt of $24,000 a year. So we're looking into actually producing our own forage. That's a koi up there. We pretty much mastered the stripping of the koi eggs, and also we are looking into pond spawning goldfish. We're seeing that the goldfish are more have more weight than the koi at 2 or 3 inches, and we just want to put the poundage in the pond for the bass. So we may switch away from the koi and go straight to goldfish. And with that, if you got any questions on the facility, I'd be happy to answer it.
I do, not on the facility, but just a question. You said they were multi-spawners. Is that because of the environment? Do they do that in the wild when you release them too?
It's natural in the bass. They're just what we call intermittent spawners, just like sunfish.
Okay. Interesting. That was very interesting, the whole presentation.
Thank you.
Mr. King, I'd like to say something. Okay. I don't know if David mentioned this, but one of the reasons that we were going down to those southern states, Texas and Louisiana and Florida, is to get the Florida bass, the pure Florida. But also, I'm not sure if you said this or not, but the timing, we want to get Florida bass fry or fingerlings in the water at Chickamauga and these other lakes before the native bass had a chance to spawn, so they wouldn't be competing with them. They would outcompete them and have a better chance of surviving. That's why we went to the hatchery. The Florida bass hatchery building now imitates early spawning for the Florida bass in Tennessee, where they wouldn't be able to do it in one of the regular ponds because the water's cold, and they would spawn like the rest of the largemouth bass do. So that was the reason we went to all the trouble and all the expense of reproducing the conditions that they would in the southern states to get an early spawn. I don't know if you may have mentioned that, David. I'm not sure.
Briefly.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there any questions? I know Commissioner Box, you visited there, didn't you?
Yes, I was about to say that. I visited there a few months ago, and just unbelievable. Tom and Hunter, what they have done as far as using their very resourceful, and even the coat hangers when they're hanging the mats up. So how do you do it? So we just use coat hangers. So they did a great job of using what they had and very well organized, and I was very impressed. So I was excited to see this today on the schedule. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I got it.
Just a quick question. So it's two days till the eggs hatch. How long until you then harvest the fry?
6 days.
6. Okay, thank you.
How many days do you grow the fry out?
No more than 40. It's based on what we call zooplankton, the food that the fingerlings are feeding on, and they could devour that quickly or slowly. So the hatchery managers are monitoring that, but it's like Bobby said, we want to get them in the reservoirs as soon as possible.
I think Commissioner Sanders has a question.
Just one question. You said you need to double your production. Can you do that with the facility you have now?
Yes, we're going to manipulate the sex ratio, and these bass weren't conditioned like they are now. As they get older, they produce more eggs, and we've got some hatcheries that are double cropping their pond. What that means is we'll put the Florida bass in, we'll harvest them, we'll come back in with striped bass. So there's a timing issue at some of the hatcheries. Humboldt has got a little more lenient on the timing, and we can actually spawn a little bit later. So we can control these bass when they spawn. We can take the mats out. Some of the states are actually feeding them and dropping the mats back in, and we can manipulate with the photo period. So that's part of the growing pains. So hopefully next year we'll be pushing that at 1 million. I'll probably still have Texas in the loop on those 300,000 just to make sure that we don't miss our year class working in this facility.
Have you estimated what your capacity is at that facility? By changing the sex ratios and because you think you can get to 1 million by changing some stuff up. I mean, what do you think ultimately you could actually produce?
Well, one Texas facility, they've got some 8, 10-year-old fish, and they're producing millions. And it's the same setup as we got. So that's what we got to learn and research is what can we do. And we can, like I said, we can stretch that spawning period out where we actually overproduced because we got those fry from other states. We actually gave Alabama 150,000 of our fry.
Thank you.
Commissioner Cox, did you have a question?
Tony asked, Commissioner Sanders asked kind of what I wanted to ask. I wanted to make sure, I think this is an exciting program. It's got the potential for all of those reservoirs to perform like Chickamauga would hope. Hunter and his crew do a great job, and I love the fact that they are resourceful enough to not just go buy forage. You're looking for ways to do it cheaper and do the goldfish and the whatever. And I was going to follow up. Do you think that you're for the next 10 years you're going to be in good shape on facilities and hatchery space and that kind of thing? I mean, what you're doing, projection, you think you can handle the capacity and continue to do what you're doing?
Yes.
That's great. That's great. Also, Hunter and his group not only do hatcheries, they show up at fishing rodeos and wherever else. They're everywhere. So we appreciate what you guys do. Thank you.
Connie, I'd just like to just say the hatchery folks just do not realize what economic effect their work has on our state. I look at towns like Paris and Dayton and just many other towns across the state that this has just had a huge economic boom. And you guys just have no idea. A lot of these towns and counties owe you guys a great bit of gratitude. But also, I don't know if any of you know this or not. I'm probably going to surprise Hunter right here. But as I was a high school student working in a sporting goods store, I can remember two guys, young boys, coming around selling wing bone turkey calls. And both of those guys work for the agency now. So I don't know if you guys know that or not. But Hunter, I still have one of those wing bone turkey calls. But you and Buddy Bryan were in college, I believe. I haven't seen you since then. But anyway, what a great job you've done for the agency. And just want to commend you for it. And thank you for what you've done for our whole state. So.
Anybody else?
Thank you, Chairman. Great presentation. I guess I don't know if I missed it or not, but do you have facility to raise your goldfish at? I mean, because you talked about where the bass are and everything, but to do your forage and everything, where would you actually do that? On some of the, can you do that in a regular pond? You don't need a raceway, or can you elaborate a little bit? Thank you.
Yeah, we were researching the koi. We were hoping we could spawn millions and millions of koi, but and hand stripping them. But we've run into some issues with that, and it seems like the goldfish are easier to do because we just put the brood out in the pond. We've got experimental ponds at Eagle Bend that are 10th acre ponds we can use. We're going to have to fence them because those are just as important as our bass brood. And Humboldt's got several ponds that they're dedicated to forage. So with the further expansion, we're going to be able to open up more ponds for the forage. And if we have those ponds available, there's no need for us to have to purchase them. The most important feeding time is usually September, October, November. That's when they're laying down their egg follicles and forming their eggs. So we kind of got, and when it gets real hot, those bass kind of slow down in the pond. So we've got several months to grow forage, and then we just pound them in the late fall and early winter.
And one follow-up on that, do you use that same forage for your other fish, your catfish, stripers, or is it strictly the bass forage for the
I think
goldfish?
Eagle Bend uses a little bit of the goldfish for their crappie brood. There is, on our crappie, we do have to purchase what they call fatheads or toughies because they're smaller and they just inhale them, they can swallow them real easy. We're wanting to grow goldfish 2.5–3 inches to get that thick biomass. It's more important that they eat a big chunky fish than a bunch of small ones. They get more benefit out of a bigger forage.
Do you have any or any evidence of growth rate yet on the new stockings? Is it too early to do that, or did I miss that?
Now, I didn't say anything about it. Frank may be able or
We have we took a rather robust sample of bass from Chickamauga Lake in 2014 to look at how exactly that question. We had to kill fish to take otoliths out to look at age and growth. And so at that time, now that was 14, that represented a lot of age groups, so a lot of time in the system. But the F1 fish, which is the first cross, and the F2 and FX, which is all the crosses after, grew statistically faster and bigger than the native or northern fish that were in the population in Chickamauga Lake. That's some of the only data like that in the southeast, where I just found out at a meeting I was at. But anyway, so they are doing well at that in those early crossings. So we're interested to see how that works over time. But I was just returned from a meeting with biologists in Texas and other states about bass management, and I got to see what some states are doing that are decades ahead of us. And I feel really strongly that the work we're doing on the Tennessee system is in the right direction, and we've got to keep stocking more to get over at least the 50% on the average fish in the lake. And then after that point, it's not going to be as important to stock Florida, as we're going to have to get even smarter about what kind of fish we use as our pedigree fish for stocking. But we're not there yet, but that's coming as well. And all the work that we're doing with the universities, where we're using their multidiscipline staff of trained geneticists, which we don't have, through all our contracts and stuff, is really helping us. The next wave of research through Tennessee Tech is going to involve a geneticist or a PhD geneticist that's working with us on it. So all of this fisheries hatchery management work is getting a lot more complicated as we deliver greater things, I think. So we're in it. We're doing all the right things right now. I believe. I feel strongly about that after that meeting. And I know I was one of the early ones to wonder where we're headed next. And I feel a lot better after talking to Texas.
I guess the question is, and I think that's wonderful, and I'm glad you're more encouraged. What the ones we've stocked in this program, I guess it's been 2 years now, or 3 years.
Yeah, the 2015 start. Those fish they're just now old enough to possibly spawn next spring in numbers. So we won't see any big fish out of that for another 8 to 10 years from that. Yeah. But we are tracking, we have that, we are tracking the genetics across all the lakes that we're working on a reasonable interval to watch what's happening. So we know what's going on in Upper Kentucky Lake and Southern Kentucky Lake and Chickamauga over time. That's going to be our guiding light as we go forward here, assuming they all work the same.
Thank you.
Yeah, are there any more questions about the presentation? If not, we have a presentation for Humboldt Hatchery. I think with that presentation that David did, you see this has all gotten a lot more intricate, and we're very lucky to have the staff that we have are willing to figure this stuff out and do all the hard work. If those guys would come up here, we want to present them